Last time on What If Toga was in 1A, I presented to you a video on What If Toga was in Class 1A Part 9. Now welcome everyone to Part 10 of What If Toga was in 1A. Sit back and relax because this is gonna be a good episode. I'm sure you remember Shinzo, Aizawa said calmly. You will be training with him during your internship. Shinzo looked to Toga without a word. Toga looked back with confusion painted all over her face. Shinzo, meanwhile, looked at her with determination, as if she was a goal to overcome. It was more than odd to see someone from the general study classes doing an internship with a hero like Aizawa. Toga was about to ask why he wanted to study for Mr. Aizawa, but was cut off by the teacher before she could say a thing. No time for chit-chat. You both came here to learn something you couldn't on your own, and you only have 2 days to learn it. So you're not going to waste time socializing. Do I make myself clear? The two students didn't dare to question the serious tone Aizawa had taken on. Instead, they simply bowed their heads to the intimidating force before them. Good. Now to start things off, we need to get you both to a better area for your training. Aizawa requested their phone numbers, sending them both a picture. Toga and Shinzo both checked the phones to see a map with a marker at a forest that was miles away from the school. Toga looked up in confusion, while Shinzo spoke up. We're training all the way out there? He inquired. Yep, you got 1 hour starting now to get there, Aizawa said flatly, which triggered the students' eyes to grow wide. No way! That's like 45 minutes away by car alone! Toga spoke up in disbelief. Well then, you better hurry. If you want to learn how to do things you can't already do to become true heroes, you need to learn how to do what you perceive as the impossible. Find a way to get there. You have 59 minutes left, so stop wasting time, Aizawa said with a serious tone. Toga and Shinzo bolted out of the room as quickly as possible. They ran through the school as fast as they could. Shortly into their run, Toga glanced to a clock on the wall. Despite how fast they were going through the halls, they were wasting too much time by running. She then looked at Shinzo, who had already built up a sweat. She muttered to herself at how impossible this task really would become if they kept on like this. Toga looked around until her eyes laid upon a partly open window. She motioned for Shinzo to follow her as she darted over to it. She pushed open the window, giving just enough space for them to fit through. If I jump from there, I'll just break my ankles, Shinzo said between attempts to catch his breath. Look, we're wasting too much time. I'll get us down safely while you think of a way to get us there faster. You and I both know there's no way we'll make it there like this, Toga replied while she held her hand out to him. Shinzo stared at her hand for a moment before he took it. Toga pulled him in quickly and swept him off his feet. She held him bridal style with a bright smile, then leapt out of the window. Shinzo was less than pleased about how she chose to carry him, and he remained silent and tensed up the moment they were airborne. Toga laughed at his reaction of being airborne so suddenly. She landed on a flagpole below them that was sticking out of the wall. From there, she leapt off once more onto the ground with a roll. The two tumbled apart from each other, picking up dust from the ground. Told you I'd get us down, Toga said with a big grin. Shinzo was less than pleased at the method, but was glad at how much time they'd saved. He got up without complaint, and with a motion for her to follow him towards the streets. Once there, he quickly attempted to wave down a taxi. With Toga's help, a taxi arrived. The two rushed into the taxi while Shinzo pulled out his phone. He requested they be taken to the exact location on the map. The driver explained he couldn't go that far out of the city. Shinzo got him to agree to get them as far as the driver could. Things seemed to be going well for about 30 minutes before they looked up to see a villain and hero fighting. The two students slammed into the seat in front of them due to the fact they had forgotten to put their seatbelts on in the rush to get into the taxi. Toga groaned and rubbed the back of her neck. Shinzo, meanwhile, checked the meter, then passed the driver the cash they owed. The two rushed out of the car to let the driver leave the scene before things got too dangerous. The students found a safe place to check their progress on their phones with a GPS app. If we were fast on foot, we may be able to get there in time. We need to cut breaks to a minimum, though, Shinzo said as he looked at his phone. Think you can do it? Toga asked in a rather doubtful tone. Shinzo seemed just as uncertain. His determination still didn't waver. He gave a nod, and the two cut around the corner to avoid the fight. They ran as hard as they could with little to no breaks. Toga saw Shinzo, who looked like he was about to pass out as they neared their goal. It was understandable, though. General studies likely didn't prepare you for this level of intense exercise. She was honestly impressed at how far he could push himself. After all, even Toga was starting to get worn down from all this. Soon, Toga could see Mr. Aizawa was already there. Despite looking like a dot given how far away he was, Toga could swear this dot almost looked tired of waiting. She looked over to Shinzo to share her excitement with how close they were, only to see him drop from exhaustion. Toga grit her teeth while she quickly raced back to him. She put one of his arms over her shoulder and then braced him the best she could to help him press on. His legs barely moved, though they still did just enough to help prevent her from dragging his total dead weight. It still slowed her down significantly, but she couldn't leave him behind when they both had gotten this far. Once they arrived, Toga finally dropped to the ground with Shinzo. You're a bit late, Aizawa said with a sigh as he looked down to them. If this was a life-or-death situation, civilian deaths could have racked up easily in the time you wasted. Toga closed her eyes in disappointment. They failed to make it in time. She opened her eyes the moment she felt a slightly moist and mildly chilled piece of plastic press against her cheek. She looked up to see it was a bottle of water. Mr. Aizawa held one to both of his intern's cheeks, with the same expression he always held. Good thing this wasn't such a situation. Good work. Toga grew a soft smile and took the bottle as she slowly sat up. Mr. Aizawa was a bit more of a softy than he let on. Toga and Shinzo took time to rest while Mr. Aizawa continued. Both of you will always be limited by your quirks if you always think about what you can't do with them. You need to think outside of the box. You need to look for ways around your limits, and ways to make up for them. He looked towards Shinzo when he said this, then to Toga for the next part. You need to find new ways to advance your quirk. You both bind yourself to the place limits that you think your quirks have. You may have been told limits, but these are never set in stone. Heroes commonly push the wall set on their quirks all the time. They even do this to the point where their quirks are far beyond what they used to be, that they seem like totally new quirks altogether. If you don't fix how you both think, then no matter how much training you do, you will never reach the heights of true pros. With that said, he instructed them both to take a 15-minute break. The students happily did so. Toga thought about what was said. She had always tried to train around her main quirk rather than attempt to find new ways to use it. She had always chosen to practice with her invisibility and other skills that didn't revolve around her main quirk. She supposed it was more due to how she had always viewed it. Though Aizawa wasn't wrong, she did still actively limit how she thought it could be used, down to a simple, quick trick. She needed to train her main quirk further. This was more easily said than done for many reasons, though. Toga thought about possibly asking Uraraka and Vlad King to help with the gathering of blood. She was pretty sure Uraraka would be willing to let Toga draw some of her blood, so long as it wasn't too much at once, while Vlad King may know of ways to get blood for training in a safe and legal way as well. The thought of asking still felt very weird. Toga could already feel her cheeks warm up at the thought alone. After a few minutes into the break, Toga finally decided to ask Shinzo what she had wanted to ask earlier. So why are you training with Mr. Aizawa? She asked before she took a swig of her water. Shinzo was silent for a long while before he finally replied. I had wanted to get into the hero course, specifically 1A. I failed to get in, though. I had thought it was because of my quirk at the time. He explained while he looked off into the distance. Then I saw you in the tournament. Someone who also had a similarly hindering quirk when it came to fighting. Despite that, You made it to 3rd. I knew if someone like you could do that and get into 1A, then even I could if I worked hard enough. Toga didn't quite like his phrasing, but she understood. If anything, she was a bit happy to know she had helped him find the drive to keep trying to reach his dreams. You'll get there. Your quirk isn't that bad. Toga smiled a bit mischievously. Your cardio, on the other hand... He rolled his eyes at her comment, which only succeeded with making Toga laugh. It was cut short when Aizawa declared if they could joke around, then they clearly had rested enough. Both muttered at their mess-up, but got ready to begin their next bit of training. Alright, your next task is simple. Toga, you are to take my blood, then use it to turn into me. Aizawa explained simply. Toga blinked in surprise at this task. It seemed way too simple. If their previous task had anything to show, there was likely something else he was trying to teach. He motioned with his hand for her to come and take his blood. So Toga started to walk forward. Aizawa then looked toward Shinzo and continued on. Shinzo, your task is simple. Toga reached over to prick him with the needles in her gloves. Do not allow Toga to turn into me. Before her needles could even pierce the skin, Shinzo darted forward to tackle Toga to the ground, but she was too fast. Given his lack of training for direct combat, Toga was easily able to spot an opening. She managed to use this to counter and shove him off. Toga thought the task was definitely not as straightforward as it seemed. Both Toga and Shinzo watched each other carefully for a moment before she took a deep breath in. Toga vanished before Shinzo's eyes, but he reacted quickly, wasting no time. He knew her goal, so he could guess her planned routes would be limited given the little time she had to think. Shinzo darted forward while he scooped up some dirt. He threw it forward to scatter around Mr. Aizawa. The dirt was displaced to reveal Toga's form. The girl was mid-leap with needles once again primed for the teacher's arm. But before the needles could meet his flesh, she was stopped. Mr. Aizawa moved quickly. He gripped her wrist with one hand, then pressed the palm of his other hand to her collarbone. He pulled her wrist away as he slammed her to the ground with the hand on her collarbone to knock the wind out of her. Toga gasped a moment later, followed by several coughs, her body visible once more. She and Shinzo both looked to their mentor with surprised expressions. I forgot to mention. He leapt backwards as his wraps slowly unraveled around his neck. I too will be defending myself. Rude, Toga groaned out with a twitch of her brow. Of course he had something like that planned. Toga got back up to her feet despite this and rushed forward towards her teacher. She skidded to a stop right as Shinzo rushed over. He had used the time while she was recuperating to get a branch. He would never win in a hand-to-hand fight. The boy hoped this would give him a slight advantage against her. With the branch, he came at her from the side and swung at her. She ducked just in time, then went with her fist to punch him in the gut. Aizawa's wrap shot forward at her arm, where it quickly wrapped around. He then yanked the wraps, which caused Toga to spin away from Shinzo. She tripped up on herself and fell onto her back, where Shinzo pressed the branch to her abdomen. This is so unfair, she grumbled out. Most fights are. As a hero, it is your duty to find a way around them, Aizawa stated simply. Shinzo stepped away to let Toga back up. The three returned to their original starting positions upon Aizawa's signal. Round 2 starts now, the teacher said casually. For hours, the three sparred. Toga was never able to use any blood that she had drawn. Mr. Aizawa was always certain to block her quirk with his own before she ever had the chance. Shinzo was never really able to stop her on his own either. On the other hand, he did get the work out of his life, while Toga was forced to think of new ways to combat the same situation multiple times in hopes to advance. In the end, both never fully completed their tasks. Aizawa never seemed upset. Instead, he seemed as if he expected things to go the way they always did. Aizawa used his eye drops and instructed the two to go home and rest. As they left, he told them to return to this location at the same time and to be ready with detailed explanations on what they learned, as well as what they can do to work on reaching their goals. Toga ended up assisting Shinzo home. Shinzo was shocked about how Aizawa just expected them to get home without help after such a long day of training. Toga only snorted and explained that was how he trained students. It was harsh, but it was very effective. From today alone, she had learned about how to think of battle strategies while she fought, to think outside of the box despite her limitations, as well as to not limit herself when it came to her main quirk. Before they parted, Toga thought back to the determination Shinzo held during their sparring matches, as well as his desire he shared earlier with her. I know you'll make it into 1A. If not this year, then next year. You're pretty smart after all. She smiled softly to him, then turned to leave. Besides, if I can get into 1A, there's no reason why you can't. The lessons they learned today would have happened even without Mr. Aizawa's help. It certainly would have taken much longer, and in situations that may have been too dangerous to learn said lessons. Even before today, Toga had managed to overcome the limit set for her by learning to fight without using her quirk. With her determination, she had managed to even get into UA despite her villainous quirk. Now there was no doubt in her mind that she would one day surpass her main quirk's limits to make it something unbelievably cool. She just needed to think of what way she could further her quirk, and how. These very thoughts filled her mind that night. She strategically thought about how her quirk functioned, and how she would be able to push her current limits. The next day, back at the forest, Aizawa waited patiently for them to share what he had instructed them to think about. Toga explained the conclusion she had come to during and after their training from the day before, along with her plan to figure out a way to surpass the current limits of her main quirk. She smiled brightly, adding in one final point she almost forgot. Oh, and I also need to practice strategizing faster while I fight to avoid future situations that will lead to my teacher suplexing me. Aizawa didn't seem to enjoy the ending joke, but he took the answer anyway. She had taken the points he had hoped to lay out for her. Aizawa then looked to Shinzo to indicate it was his turn to share his own learnings. If I want to become a hero as well as get into Class 1A, I need to start thinking like I'm already in that class. If I keep looking at things as if I already failed, I will never make it in. My body is also still not as fit as most others, so I need to start working towards improving my physical abilities, Shinzo said seriously. Well done, both of you, Aizawa said before he tossed a spare bundle of wraps to Shinzo. I expect you both to do better than yesterday, especially you, Shinzo. I still have major dry eye from yesterday. I want you to start practicing with those wraps. It'll take a long time to master them, so don't get frustrated if you don't get them at first. After all, I'm still working on the fighting style. With that said, the three began to train once more. This time they did so throughout the entire day. They only stopped once for food, though it was more due to the fact that both Shinzo and Toga were so tired they could barely stand. When it got later into the night, Aizawa stopped the sparring early. He had gotten a call that seemed rather important, given how quickly he had instructed the two of them to return their hero gear to the school and go straight home, only to then rush off. The two were a bit confused. Right as they shared similar looks of confusion, their phones went off with emergency alarms. The notifications instructed them to evacuate and or stay away from Hosu City. There were several monsters that were attacking everyone, and if that wasn't bad enough, the hero killer that had been in the news lately was spotted in the area. Both students rushed to their feet. Despite their exhaustion, they began to move quickly. This situation was beyond serious. As they ran, Toga began to call up Uraraka. Once she confirmed she was safe and informed her best friend she too was okay, she called up her mother to tell her she was okay and would be home once she dropped off her costume. After that, as they arrived at the school, Toga changed her clothes. She and Shinzo checked the situation in the city on their phones. It seemed the hero killer had been captured with the help of 3 UA students. Toga thought about it for a moment, while Shinzo wondered aloud which of their fellow students could have done that. As Toga heard the reports of the hero killer, she heard one of his targets had been Ingenium. She looked up the name of the hero, and upon the moment she saw the hero, her heart sank. She knew the name sounded familiar. It was Ida's brother. No doubt Ida had gone after him. Midoriya had followed Ida around during that time, so there was a strong likelihood he was one of the 3 students. Toga told Shinzo she had to leave and rushed out. On her way out of the school, she called up Midoriya. After a long wait, he finally answered. Relief washed over her as she ran home. The two talked about the situation. Midoriya reassured her that he was safe and would be okay. He then explained how during that situation, a monster was about to fly off with him when the hero killer had saved him. Toga was shocked by this, but more grateful that Midoriya was safe. She said goodbye as she arrived home to her mother's embrace. The two ended up curling up on the couch to eat dinner and keep an eye on the news. Her father even joined them. He used her mother as a divider between him and Toga, but joined them regardless. Her parents ended up falling asleep watching the television. Toga was close to joining them in sleep, but kept her eyes trained on the TV as it began to cover the hero killer. Her attention grew more focused on him when she heard his quirk, and even further when they began to interview some of the people off the streets about him. The thoughts were varied. A few saw him as a visionary. He wished to change the world from being centered around heroes who became heroes for fame, and more towards people who became heroes in order to save lives. With these people, the cameras would cut as they began to talk about how unfair the system was to people whose looks were drastically altered by quirks, and those with villainous quirks. Even if the cameras were cut, each time their feelings were clear. The hero killer had tried to work for a better and more fair world. Despite his noble goals, he apparently ended up dying right after saving one of her friends due to a punctured lung. His methods were harsh, but Toga couldn't help but wonder if he was truly such a bad person at the core. Could bad people do what they did with goals like his? She didn't think so. She could only think about if she would have ended up like him if her mother hadn't cared for her. The thought was followed by a minor fear. If she told her mother the truth of what happened the other day, would all the progress she made be reverted? And that's our video for today, so thank you all for indulging yourselves in our story thus far. I hope you have enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things I need to go over before the video ends. First, we have a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts and lore of a wide variety of anime, which is sure to expand your weeb knowledge of all kinds, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. So go check that out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Finally, if you like what we do here at We the Celestials, then I want to extend an invitation to join our team. We only have one caveat: you must be 16 years or older to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or you're looking to join our band of misfits. And so that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and I do hope you have a great day. And before I go, I do hope everyone is taking care of themselves mentally and physically. You deserve happiness no matter what anybody says. Treat everyone with compassion because you never know what they're going through. Be kind to yourself, because there's no one else like you out there. This has been Tim, Mustache out.